Welcome to the Switch4Good podcast. I'm Alexandra Paul with my wonderful co-host, Dotsie Vaush, and we have a really interesting guest today.
I know. I can't wait. It's my girl.
Tell us a little bit about your weekend, actually. You had a really fun weekend.
I did. I got to go to SoCal Veg Fest, which was in Costa Mesa, and speak on the athlete panel. And then I went to a really hip vegan party afterwards at the home of our next guest.
Oh, so she's a partier too, as well as being a doctor?
She can throw one. It was awesome. The vegan spread was the biggest vegan spread I've ever seen. I'm literally still full. I mean, I've been eating less the last few. It was so good. I had 3 plates.
What was your favorite thing?
And well, she had these like amazing monstrous bowls that were made up of all different they're almost like ethnic bowls. There was kind of like a South American one and kind of an Asian one, and so it was all these wonderful flavors with grains and greens and nuts and seeds and dressings and lots of raw veggies and lots of fruit everywhere, and it was just delicious. Like I got a vitamin surge leaving. But so she had a trivia, like a vegan trivia that we did. And Dr. Garth Davis was there, who's the author of Proteinaholic. Amazing book.
Very good
I'm
book.
like a third of the way through.
Yeah.
I got to have it. He signed it at the party. So he had a team and then I had a team. And we competed against each other. And it ended up being a tie, which did not make me happy because I wanted to win.
You know a lot about dairy trivia and things. So.
I did. I think we got the what has the most calcium in the plant world question right. I actually had to fight our guest and the people that work for her for it because it is tahini. Yes.
And it's tahini and they thought it was
collard greens, which is very high, but tahini has just a wee bit more calcium.
Woo!
So yeah.
Go Team Bausch.
Yeah.
Yay. And also you saw Robbie Barbero, who's been a guest on our podcast.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. And they also had another contest going on, the kindest vegan and the most well-known vegan and things like that. And Robbie won the most vegan, which I think that you will agree with.
Oh, yeah, the most vegan.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's great. Wow, she sounds amazing. I bet I'm so excited to talk to her, and I know our listeners and watchers will be also.
Yes. So our guest, we won't hold it any longer. It's Dr. Angie Sadeghi. And what is the one food you should avoid for improving health? Dairy, especially cheese. The casein, protein, and saturated fats go into the GI tract and promote inflammation by helping the growth of inflammatory gut bacteria. This is a quote from our special guest today, and one I'm so excited to have on, Dr. Angie Sadeghi, a whole food plant-based gastroenterologist from Newport Beach, California. She even goes as far to say that in her 15 years of medical experience and all of her research, she has not found even one single reason why anybody should be consuming dairy. And what is Dr. Angie's ultimate goal? She says, I want to leave a legacy of a doctor who prevented disease in her patients using the mastery of combining integrative medicine rather than simply using pharmaceuticals. Well, she's certainly on her way to leaving a lasting impact. And today we're going to hear from Dr. Sadeghi about all of the uncomfortable conditions of the gut that could be reversed with a few simple changes to our diet and how she transformed her own life, having previously suffered from health problems such as severe eczema, elevated cholesterol, fatigue, and even being overweight. And we may even get to hear her top reasons why everyone should see a plant-based doctor. So thank you, Dr. Angie, for being here. We're so stoked to have you. I've been excited about this one.
Thank you for having me. It's my honor and pleasure.
So. Okay. This is one of those that I think we could sit here for 3 hours, but we're going to try and do this in 45 minutes or something along those lines. Before we get into the gut, which we are going to go deep into today, I want everyone to know your journey, your story with going plant-based, because it's a powerful one.
Absolutely. So as you guys know, during medical school, undergraduate medical school and residency training and even fellowship, the training is focused on diagnosing disease and treating disease and running diagnostics and pushing pills and pushing surgeries. And it's never about preventing disease. And so there's very little knowledge among all my peers in regards to nutrition and how to prevent disease. So I went through medical school and just basically traditionally got trained the same way most of my colleagues have been trained. But my story goes back to when I was a teenager and I started having really bad eczema. So I had such bad pustular eczema, and those are these lesions that come on your palms of your hands, and they're painful and extremely itchy. So I grew up scratching the heck out of my skin every single day. So I kept going to dermatologists and doctors who gave me a prednisone pack with a tapering dose for a week to put me into sort of a remission, and Benadryl to be able to sleep so I don't scratch myself and make myself bleed every night. And that went on cycles and cycles of that. And I was so disturbed by the fact that I couldn't prevent these lesions from coming on. And I thought, what could I be doing? So I wore gloves because I figured I'm allergic to leather because I'm driving and my wheel was leather. I went as far as basically changing my diet, but it never occurred to me because we're brainwashed growing up that it's indoctrinated in our culture that you have to eat dairy and calcium should come from dairy, right? So it never occurred to me that the dairy that I've been taught that's good for you could be giving me the eczema. So I continued consuming tons of yogurt and dairy products. It wasn't until 5 years ago when I went to a seminar where the speaker, who's my brother, said, if you're trying to lose weight, and by the way, I was overweight too, obviously, and I was consuming tons and tons of cheese. He said, not addressing me, but addressing everyone. He showed this video, Dairy Scary, and he also said, if you're trying to lose weight, what the heck are you doing consuming dairy? And I'm like, that's true. What the heck am I doing consuming dairy? Okay, that's it.
Because cow's milk is basically supposed to get a little calf from 100 pounds to 600 pounds in record time.
Precisely. And if you haven't watched that movie, it was very powerful to me. Dairy Scary.
It's by Erin Janis. Yeah,
yes.
I've heard of it, but I have not
it's
seen
fantastic.
it.
Yeah, Erin's coming on the podcast.
Oh, great. Yes.
Everyone should see that. And when I watched that, it was like
Michael,
pretty
are you
powerful.
taking notes, Michael?
Yes.
Okay.
So as of that day, I stopped consuming dairy. And of course, I talked to my cousin who's a musician in Hollywood who's a vegan, and she knows I love animals, and I was a vegetarian for 15 years at that point. And she said, and I had told her I haven't had meat for 15 years or 10 years at the time. She said, well, I hate to tell you this, but if you're doing this for the animals, I want to tell you that the dairy industry is far more cruel to the animals than the meat industry. So I was like, there are two really great reasons that I should never eat dairy again. So that's what happened. As of that day, I stopped eating dairy. I'm not exaggerating, guys. About 3 to 7 days later, pustular eczema was gone.
Wow.
I wasn't itching. I wasn't, all those pustular looking, they look like whiteheads and all over my hands. I looked like I had a zoster break out every day. I was embarrassed to shake my patients' hands. And literally, they all went away. It turns out retrospectively that I had an allergic reaction, which most people have, to the proteins in dairy. So as of that time, pretty much it's been my life's mission to get everyone off dairy. And more as studies and literature comes out, we know how bad it is for the GI tract and everything else. So anyway, I'm just so lucky that I stumbled upon this. And so I'm glad to be here today because I feel like it's my mission now to spread the message and let people know what dairy is doing to them.
When you see those commercials for pharmaceuticals on television, and I'm thinking specifically of the one that's like for psoriasis, so, not too dissimilar from eczema where the condition feels the same, it's embarrassing, it's itchy, it's painful. What would you say to people who maybe have eczema or psoriasis and are watching those commercials and thinking drugs are the only way?
you have to understand, we live in a capitalistic country. So when you see advertisements on television, it's not necessarily the whole truth. Yes, there are clinical trials that show that TNF alpha inhibitors and those drugs that are sold for psoriasis put psoriasis into remission. But is that the only thing you can do to put psoriasis into remission? And the answer is no. I have had several patients with psoriasis who went on a whole food plant-based diet before initiating these TNF alpha inhibitors, and their psoriasis got better. So
with no side effects that the alpha inhibitors would bring on, except for good side effects.
Absolutely.
What would those side effects be? Because that's important to know. What are some of the gnarly things people...
Lymphomas, like cancers.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Exactly.
I think I'd rather have psoriasis.
Right. Me too. Depends. I guess some people have really bad psoriasis that hits their joints and they're carpeted with these silver scaly lesions from scalp to toes. And by the way, those are similar medicines that we use for inflammatory bowel disease. So I know very much about these side effects. And so you can have severe deadly infections because it's really just killing your immune system, right? So your immune system doesn't attack your skin or your bowels. And so what happens is they have a lot of side effects that you could avoid. And so my suggestion would be that if you've seen a physician and you've been taught that, well, or you've been asked to go on a medication, do your research and find out whether nutrition could be helpful. And a very good example of this is a disease called eosinophilic esophagitis, which commonly attacks the esophagus. And it's an allergic esophagitis. Esophagitis means inflammation of the esophagus. And the immune system attacks the esophagus. And there is such an epidemic of that. I see a few per week or at least few per month of eosinophilic esophagitis, which patients come in and they can't swallow food. So when they initiate the swallow, the food gets stuck into their esophagus. Oftentimes, I have to put the scope down into the esophagus and put these nets in there and break up the chicken or the pork, whatever they ate. And by the way, it's putrefied in there. It smells really, really bad. It's disgusting. It smells really bad. I have to wear like a few masks and put like perfumes under my nose to be able to tolerate the putrefied smell of this dead meat, right? I mean, putrefied meat, I should say. Exactly. It could have sat there for 2 days in some cases. And it cuts off the blood supply of the esophagus, and it basically causes ischemia to the esophagus. By the time we go in there and pull this thing out, we have to piecemeal it and use nets that grab on to the food and just piecemeal bring it out while the patient's under anesthesia for a couple of hours sometimes. And so I can tell you this condition constricts the esophageal mucosa, and so pretty much it looks like the trachea. So that's what we call a trachealization of the esophagus. Really bad deal. Okay, it's a bad deal. The esophagus loses its flexibility. It turns out I started literally just out of curiosity, started doing a lot of IgE allergic testing on these patients, and I realized there was such a commonality among everyone with eosinophilic esophagitis. It turns out the proteins in dairy are causing a huge allergic reaction in these patients. So I was like, oh, I didn't study this in training, right? But, the training, they tell you, all right, well, put them on a PPI, proton pump inhibitor, to cut down the acid. And sometimes that goes away, which is true. And give them a bunch of steroids. And they swallow the steroids that usually asthmatics use for the lung.
Which also have a lot of side effects.
Absolutely. Of course.
Negative side effects.
Absolutely. Instead, they swallow it for the treatment. I stumbled upon this on my own because I didn't actually read it in my books. I was like, I don't know 100%. I told my patient, I don't know 100%, but I think if you got off the dairy based on your allergy testing, you'll be fine. And lo and behold, I'd have all these patients come back and they're like, you were right. I'm good.
Wow. Now you, as a gastroenterologist, deal with basically, you say, from the mouth to the anus, right? The digestive system.
Correct.
What other diseases and problems do patients come to you with, about which you discuss a plant-based diet and find that they improve after going on a plant-based diet?
That's such a good question. And I can tell you that almost every single disease I diagnose and treat in clinic, has something to do with diet. And, as we call it, you're given certain genetics, that's for sure. But genetics load the gun and nutrition pulls the trigger. So there is not even one single disease that I can think of as far as the gastrointestinal tract is concerned that doesn't have something to do with the nutrition. And why is that? Well, there are 36 to 100 trillion gut microbiome that live in our bodies, mouth to anus. Okay, so there's more.
36 trillion?
Can you even imagine that? Like, how much is that?
Doesn't it weigh several pounds, like 10 pounds or something?
Yes.
Our gut microbiome?
Exactly. So you can imagine.
It's good, everybody. Sounds creepy, but it's actually really good.
Well, it could be good if you have the good gut microbiome, not the inflammatory gut microbiome, right? So the point, though, is that these gut microbiome, they carry a lot of responsibilities in our body and how we function, our physiology. And basically, you have more genetics combined in your gut microbiome than you as an individual. So you're only 1% human.
Wow. All your DNA is in your microbiome.
Exactly.
Explain
Pretty
to
much.
us, you have more genetics in your, so you're more, who you are and what you exhibit, diseases, et cetera, is more about your microbiome than your genetics, is what you're saying?
That is a big yes.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. So you have more, there are viruses, fungi, and bacteria that live in your gut. And you're exposed to these gut microbiome from the minute you're born. And they dictate your body. There are so many powerful studies that have been done in regards to nutrition and gut microbiome, disease and microbiome. And one of the most amazing studies that was eye-opening to me, that got me thinking about the gut microbiome initially. Because let me just go back. I don't want to digress too much, but I want to tell you that in training, we didn't know anything about the gut microbiome. When I was at USC training for fellowship. Before that, I was doing stem cell research. I was doing liver research. I had no interest in the luminal GI tract. I wanted to reverse fibrosis. And, what happened was, as I was going on liver rounds and people with liver cirrhosis, I realized that when we give them a antibiotic called rifaximin, right, it was helpful. So what happens with these patients with cirrhosis, they get confused. They don't know where they are. They don't know who they are. They don't know what their names are. And they start tremoring like that. It's called hepatic encephalopathy. Why? When you eat the protein in the diet, the bacteria, gut microbiome gets a hold of it, and they produce ammonia, and the ammonia goes into your blood, and it has nowhere to go because the liver's not working.
Okay, I have to stop because my dearest friend's mother is dying of her liver shutting down. She's been on a cancer treatment for 10 years that's kept her alive, but they told her it would eventually kill her liver. And what's happening right now, yesterday, was her ammonia got so high that she got disoriented. She didn't know who anyone was. She had to go to the hospital, get it drained because of what she's eating.
That's right.
Now, how does this have to do with, so how does the gut microbiome link to that?
Well, the gut microbiome is producing these toxins that go
the ammonia.
Yes.
Because of what they're eating.
Right.
So if she ate a plant-based diet, how would that affect her?
So the meats are very high in these, they directly feed this gut microbiome that produce the ammonia. That's why these hepatic encephalopathic patients do well on a low protein diet. Okay. So
I know, I've been trying. I know that's a whole other conversation. To get her.
Maybe
I know.
if you quote Dr. Angie, it'll help.
Yeah. I think
this got me interested because I realized during rounds that when we gave them these powerful antibiotics called rifaximin, which go into the gut and kill the bad bacteria, they would perk up. Literally within, you give them 2 pills and they would perk up. And I'm like, what happened? I mean, I'm like, are you telling me that these gut microbiome are that powerful that they would like, a person who doesn't know their name and birthday suddenly wake up and they carry a conversation with you overnight? So that's when I realized, oh, wait a minute. These gut microbiota are way more powerful than we're giving them credit. In the meanwhile, as I was going through my stem cell research fellowship before I entered my GI fellowship, we had a guy at USC who was like, I swear these gut microbiome have so much to do with so much. And everyone thought he's crazy. Everyone's like, you just think like they rule everybody's world and cause all these diseases.
Because
we're
they
not
do.
disagreeing that, yeah, exactly. But they're like, we're not disagreeing that, they don't have anything to do with disease, but we think you're way exaggerating. Anyway, he went to Arizona, is doing went to do research over there. I think he was underappreciated, obviously. He was brilliant and he was so forward thinking. We underestimate, but it got me thinking, and that's why when I saw this rifaximin medicine given to these hepatic encephalopathic patients, they perk up. I'm like, oh my God, there's something to this. And of course, later on, I studied the gut microbiome, and this is all self-taught, by the way, because back when I was doing training in 2006, there was
no discussion of it. I only heard of it first like 2 or 3 years ago.
Exactly.
That was it.
So that's where it all started coming out. So then I started doing the research and I was like, wow. In fact, being plant-based got me involved in doing more research, and I took interest in learning about the gut microbiome.
So how does being plant-based change the microbiome? And what I'm hearing is that you're saying that if you're plant-based, your microbiome is healthier for you. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So plants increase the diversity of the gut microbiome.
Which is important?
Very important. So that's why I tell my patients, pick up different plants. I challenge them to go to the grocery store and pick up a plant they never had before. Maybe or herbs, and just try to introduce different plants to increase the diversity of your gut. Mm-hmm. So, and we can talk about disease, and oh my gosh, there's so much we can talk about. It's like there is
now,
so
I do
much,
know that people, you can tell what someone's eating by looking at their microbiome, and you can tell not only who's fat and who's thin, right?
Yes.
Through looking at the microbiome, but also whether they are vegan, plant-based, or they eat meat.
Yes, absolutely. So actually, let me go back to my story of rifaximin. Another study that I read that blew my mind is that if you took thin mice and transplant the gut microbiota of a fat mice, and this study was a powerful study that was done at Harvard, these skinny mice would gain weight.
Yes.
And the diet was the same.
Without even taking in one more calorie.
That's right.
Now,
that's right.
Okay, so this is something where I think about, because my husband is an omnivore. He doesn't eat a lot of meat, but he does eat meat. And sometimes I think, I don't want your microbiome, because we kiss and make love and we swap spit. We're like, I don't want his microbiome.
I know.
Right?
But it's about that all the time when I'm not kidding. When I get into a relationship, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want your microbiome. I would rather kiss a vegan dog than a carnivore man.
I kiss vegan dogs all day long. My own.
That helps our microbiome then.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, seriously, if you want to be thin, go into a household with a bunch of thin people and start accumulating the gut microbiome, because families tend to share the same gut microbiome.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So my history with anorexia, I got much, much better when I was still an omnivore. Finding veganism was 15 years after I got better. And I was fairly balanced, I would say. I mean, I was so much better than I was that I was better. And I was racing professionally, and I didn't put too much thought into it. But when I went 100% plant-based and vegan, so for the last 8 years, I do notice that I don't have to think for one single second whether I'm going to gain a pound or lose a pound, or gain 5 pounds or lose 5 pounds. I don't have any conversations with myself of, oh, I shouldn't have that because I didn't work out today. These are past conversations, right, that maybe I was still having. Or I shouldn't eat quite this much or have this dessert because tomorrow I'm not going to work out, or I'm not. None of those conversations happen anymore. I eat whatever I want, whenever I want. A lot of it, work out sometimes, not nearly like I used to. Sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. And I am just the same size I've been for 8 years.
Absolutely.
It's just not a second. And that sounds to me like it's more about my microbiome staying balanced, being healthy and staying balanced, than whether I'm eating 500 more calories on some given day or not.
Absolutely. I think it's multifactorial, but the gut microbiome has it's a huge component of it. But you mentioned you still exercise since winning the medal. You haven't stopped exercising, and even exercise shapes the gut microbiome. Also,
how does it shape it?
It improves the diversity of the gut microbiome.
And
yes.
why is that? Because different bacteria go, I like all this oxygen I'm getting, and they flourish?
The exact mechanism, we don't know. We just know it's correlated.
Wow.
It's really amazing. So lifestyle habits are really key. For someone who's eating a plant-based diet, for example, exercising, getting good sleep, even sleep shapes the gut microbiome. So good habits shape the gut microbiome. But also because studies show that if you put patients who are unhealthy and obese or overweight on a whole food plant-based diet, they don't have to count calories. They'll lose the bad fat around their trunk and the unhealthy inflammatory fat, right? So it could be because, I know it is, because the whole food plant-based diet is not calorically dense, and it's not feeding the bad gut microbiome, which could propagate and basically cause inflammation
and make you crave.
That's right. That's right. I mean, they say, if you keep eating sugar, you're going to crave sugar because you're feeding the gut microbiome that are feeding on that sugar. So it's whatever you're eating, you crave more of it.
It's not that you just don't have willpower. It's that you literally have little mini monsters down there needing that
absolutely.
processed sugar.
How many times do you guys remember we used to think these people were like, I swear I don't eat much and I gain weight, and we used to think they're crazy. We used to think they're closet eaters, right? I am a big believer that people who have trouble losing weight or keeping the weight off are people who have an imbalance of gut microbiome. And I'm going to throw this medical word out. I hate doing that, but it's called dysbiosis, because if you read it on the internet, it's called dysbiosis, an imbalance of the gut microbiome and lack of diversity. They have dysbiosis. Their metabolism is not like yours or I. Sometimes if I'm not on my trying to get on stage diet, I can eat 4,000 calories.
Dr. Angie, by the way, is a fitness competitor, but I've read that you also don't spend a lot of time in the gym because you feel that diet is more of a component to how great you look. I don't spend a lot of time.
I do not spend. I work out for 25 minutes, maximum 30 minutes. I think diet is everything. I'm a mom. I run a practice. I have to pay people's paychecks, and I'm very consumed as a mom and a doctor, where I don't have a lot of time working out. But I found the secret to health and well-being and staying in shape and powerful at the gym. Dotsie and I were talking, we were having lunch in Fashion Island one day, and it was my first time meeting her, and it was like the most exciting thing. I was like, I'm meeting Dotsie Bosch. But what we talked about is, she was like, we're the same age, and she's like, do you feel your age? I'm like, no, we feel like 25. Yeah. I feel powerful at the gym. This is not a coincidence. Why is it that 45-year-old ladies my age are dragging themselves every day? They have joint pains. They have problems all the time where they're depressed and trying to lose weight and they can't. There is a reason. It's their diet,
and therefore their gut microbiome is one of the factors that's dragging them down and making them depressed, because that's also, our mood is also affected by our gut, right?
I believe so. Okay, so there is research that shows 95%. Have you guys heard of serotonin? Serotonin is the feel-good hormone. Yeah. And we commonly
use antidepressant drugs are.
That's right.
Serotonin uptake.
Serotonin reuptake inhibitors to increase serotonin in your body. But we used to try to target that serotonin increase in between the synapses in the brain. Well, now we know where it's made. 95% of serotonin is made by the gut. So if you have a healthy gut, you're going to have naturally higher levels of serotonin than somebody who's eating meat and dairy like I was. I'll tell you guys a quick story, and I haven't shared this that much before with many people, but back when I was a big dairy and meat eater, I was very depressed. I was coming back from medical school one day to visit my family. I was on the plane, and I looked out the window. I remember I had the aisles. I didn't have the aisle seat. I had the window seat. And I looked outside, beautiful blue skies and clouds. Okay. And I had nothing to be depressed about. I'm in medical school on my way to achieving my biggest dream, the dream of my life, to become a physician, which I wanted since I was 9 years old. I was coming back from medical school. I looked outside the window and I thought to myself, God, I wish this plane would crash. I don't want to live anymore. And the only thing that made me want to change, thoughts are things that I'm like, switch that thought. There's like 100 people sitting in this plane. And that was such a selfish thought that went through my head without even, I'm a good person, I generally think. And I would never think that on purpose, but bad thoughts were coming into my head and I wanted to die. And I was like, why am I feeling like this? And I didn't know. And I just knew that I have to drag myself out of bed every day, fatigue, everyone else is studying and I can't stay awake, you know, and I had to like force myself out of bed. I would have bad dreams. I just didn't have a good life. I was unhappy, even though I had a family to go back home to. There's nothing, you know, that should have made me depressed. And I wanted this plane to crash. And I caught myself and I changed my wish because I didn't want everyone else to die. But I certainly wanted to die. And I wouldn't have killed myself. But if I died, it would have been okay. Because at that point, I didn't even have a child. But I can tell you, my diet was bad. I was eating fried chicken and oily stuff and cheese quesadillas. And God, I had cheese quesadillas every day for lunch. I mean, that's the type of foods I used to eat. I had very little fruits, very little vegetables. I was on sort of a ketosis diet.
Tell me about the ketosis diet, because Dotsie and I were talking about it. A friend of mine told me last week, I hadn't seen him in a while, and he said, I'm on the keto diet and I feel great and I've lost 7 inches in my waist. And I didn't know what to say because he was so happy. And if it was working for him, I thought, Alexandra, just listen. And then I went and did some research. But I'd like to hear from you about this high that people get on a keto diet
from the famine that they're experiencing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are the famine of the gut microbiome. Jeez. I mean, they're starving their inner self.
The good bacteria.
Absolutely.
They're starving. Yeah.
There's some research that got published, which was groundbreaking. I believe it was Cell. This journal pretty much explained how you have a protective layer in your gut, which protects against antigens and microbiome and the bacteria that are not supposed to be there.
It's like a biofilm.
Yes, a biofilm. And so these biofilm, they're basically composed of these proteoglycans. And when you starve your inner self, i.e. starve the gut microbiome, these gut microbiome need to eat fiber, right? That's what they thrive off of, fiber. So what do they start breaking down? The biofilm. Okay, so that's where
for fiber, because they start eating.
They need fiber.
Because they need fiber.
You starve your gut microbiome.
The good bacteria need fiber.
That's
the
what
bad
we think.
Bacteria need sugar and
that's
other
right.
things.
We think that these bacteria, they thrive off of fiber, the good guys, and when you starve them, they have no choice but to digest your body in order to get what they need. And when they lose that, they die out. That's where you lose diversity in your gut. And that's where you get constipated diarrhea, or you get alternative constipation and diarrhea. And all kinds of bad things happen. You get rheumatoid arthritis or Hashimoto's or different diseases, coronary artery disease. I mean, all of that happens. It's not a surprise because, and you know, in on the streets, the name is leaky gut. You know, leaky gut has leaky gut. There's really no scientific definition to leaky gut, except what I can think about is what they mean is that you basically destroy the inner gut biofilm or the protective film that is supposed to be there. So a ketosis diet, for those of you who don't know what that is when you consume a high level of fat, and usually saturated fat, because you're manipulating your macronutrients in a way that is not natural. When you eat a whole food plant-based diet, which is natural to our body, you are consuming about 60% carbohydrates and fiber-rich carbohydrates, right? And so maybe 20% fats, and the rest is proteins. Okay. Now, what do you do when you manipulate the macronutrient levels to unnatural levels? Well, what happens is you're consuming pure fat from processed, for example, cheese. These people consume a lot of cheese,
and butter.
Right? Butter and highly fatty foods with saturated fat. So what happens is, number one, that increases the bibliophilic gut microbiome. There's studies that show that when you feed humans saturated fat like processed meat and cheese, the standard American diet, within 2 days, their bibliophilic, bile-loving gut microbiome increases. These are inflammatory.
The bile-loving, you mean the ones that love to eat your
that need fiber, so they're eating the
bile-loving gut
biofilm.
microbiome are basically when you eat fatty foods in order for digestion to occur, the gallbladder squeezes and spits out a whole bunch of bile. into your gut. And
the bile loving.
bile
Loves
that
bile.
comes from the liver,
gotcha.
gets stored into the gallbladder, and it gets squeezed out when you eat fats. That's what happens to digest all that fat. When you eat unnaturally high levels of fat, you get an increase production of bile in your gut. What does that translate to? Acid or alkalinity? Acidity.
Yeah.
So you get a whole bunch of acid. And the population of the bile-loving, in medical jargon, we call it bilophilic gut microbiome, they increase within 2 days. Okay?
So why do people on a keto diet often say they feel good? They feel better?
You know, part of it is like, you know, because you hear from your friends, oh, they did okay. And it's like, when you look at the studies, actually, that's not true. People feel tired.
Well, and they're losing weight. So,
Right.
so
So they
I mean,
feel good
I
about
think there's
that.
part.
And
I think
also
they feel good about
sometimes they say
themselves.
they're
They feel
eating
good. They
less
stick to something.
Processed carbs. They're eating less
Yes.
sugar,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so they feel good
That's
about
so
that.
true.
Feeling lighter and
That's
more
so
agile,
true.
because definitely, I mean, calorie deprivation is calorie deprivation, and so some people are going to lose weight on it. It just
Right.
what's really scaring me is the future.
My problem with
Their
that is
future.
they're also losing a lot of the glycogen in their muscles that's reserved to go
Yes.
powerlifting or lifting weights or
Yes.
running.
And muscle tissue in
Yes.
general.
So the minute they eat a donut, they gain like 7 pounds, they blow up. Right.
Right,
So it's not natural.
Right.
They're destroying the gut microbiome. They're actually predisposing themselves to diabetes, because now we know that saturated fat actually causes diabetes by basically screwing up with the insulin transporter systems in the muscle cells. So, and you're right, the future is unknown with these ketosis diets. If you ask me, if they were to do a prospective study and follow these people for years and years and test their gut microbiome, good luck.
Yeah. Now, you talked
Scary.
about constipation. A lot of Americans struggle with that. What if someone is eating a meat and milk diet, and then they switch over to a vegan diet? What can happen to their microbiome and their digestive
That's
system?
such a good idea. By the way, if people don't believe what you just said, which is so true, constipation is so common, just walk into a pharmacy. There is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah.
Miralax, Dulcolax,
Oh God, it's a
Senna,
whole
tea.
entire aisle.
I mean, have you ever, I've barely ever met a vegan who's not hypothyroid, who can't have 2 or 3 bowel movements a day.
If they eat a whole food,
That's right.
Remember, it's easy to be vegan and be a junk food
Right.
vegan, so we have to emphasize whole food.
That's right.
plants.
Whole food plant-based, because the difference is you are getting tons of fiber,
Yeah.
and you're not getting SOS, sugar, oil, salt in a whole food plant-based diet. Whereas in a vegan diet, you can get sugar, oil, salt, which is not necessarily good, and you're not getting a lot of fiber. So there's there are different fibers. You want to eat variety to get different types of fibers, different vegetables and fruits, nuts, seeds, grains, and legumes. So going back to your question, about most of the weight of the stool is actually bacteria. That's why there's a joke on Instagram where you see the vegan guy carrying a big toilet paper and going to the restroom, because we never have problems with constipation, generally speaking, unless there are exceptions. There's Hirschsprung disease and there is hypothyroidism, and you have to consult with your doctor. But if you have constipation, it's been going on chronically for years, and you've been ruled out for colon cancer, hypothyroidism, Hirschsprung, consider going on a whole food plant-based diet, because what you do is fiber is magical, you guys. Fiber is such a magical nutrient. It stimulates the gut. It has a stimulating effect. It drags water into the colon, and it basically increases the population of the gut microbiome. That's why you get more stool. You go more often, okay, and you get bulking of the stool. Good luck finding a medication that does that.
So you and I have talked about this a few times, because I've been really interested on how you guide your patients if they are eating, really heavy meat, dairy diet, right?
Yes.
Like if the next day they just start eating all whole food
Oh,
plant-based,
yes.
all sorts of issues. So we have our very own resident case study in here. Michael has been milk-free for 1 week.
Yay, Michael!
Okay, we found that out this morning, but he's feeling constipated.
Right.
So I know that this is all sorts of issues come up if you don't take your patients on a journey towards
Right.
the
Absolutely.
whole food
Microbiome
plant-based, because
needs
it's
to
too
adjust.
much.
Absolutely.
So
It's
what's
a
happening to him?
transition,
What can
guys.
he? What?
Absolutely. A lot of times, deep down, I want to tell people, get off all that crap and don't eat it again. But, the truth is that the digestive capability is not like yours and mine. There is not enough diversity of the gut microbiome. And so to really answer that question, let me tell you that we used to think that there's 17 enzymes in the body which get spit out from the pancreas, and then there's the bile, and there's a hydrochloric acid from the stomach. Boom, that's about it. Okay. We know now that there are thousands of digestive enzymes that actually digest fiber. We didn't know about this before. But fiber gets actually digested by the gut microbiome. We didn't know, right? So we used to think you eat fiber, well, through osmosis, it drags some water into your colon. Therefore, that's why when you eat fiber, you're not constipated. That's not entirely true anymore. We know that the gut microbiome have enzymes that we don't have in our bodies to digest fiber-rich foods. So if someone doesn't eat those fiber-rich foods, and then suddenly you give them a bean, they're going to blow up because they don't have the digestive capability, because they don't have the digestive diversity of the gut microbiome. That breaks that down. So how do you do it? Well, what I like to do is I like to transition them and slowly increase the fiber and the variety of foods that they get. I start with high starch, low fiber foods like potatoes. Potatoes, the carbohydrates in potatoes are very gut healing. Similar compounds are found in breast milk to heal the gut. So what you want to do is basically give them those low fiber, high carb foods like potatoes, and slowly bring in the raw vegetables and the beans that you and I will have with no problems. People
I
who
eat a
suffer,
head of cauliflower a day with no problems.
Yeah, there you go.
I like it cooked, but I have no problems. And everyone else goes, I can't eat cauliflower.
I was eating a huge thing of beans, and my pharmaceutical rep that was in trying to sell me probiotics. It was so funny.
My beans.
I loved having her because she's like, I couldn't eat all that. And I'm like, well, if your supplement works so great, then people think they can swallow probiotics and they're fine. But yeah, I mean, she's like, I could never eat that. I would blow up like a balloon. I'm like, oh, well, let me know if you want to come see me as a patient. And so she made an appointment, and she's coming to see me in January to get her gut healed, because she's been taking all these supplements and they're not, obviously they don't work, because you can't, I tell my patients, if you have a fire, okay, you have a fire distinguisher from here on one side, but then you're feeding it fuel. Who's going to win?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
You've also compared it to putting sand on the beach.
That's right.
Taking probiotics.
Taking probiotics is like throwing sand on the beach. You are not going to win. The food will always win. Do you see what I mean?
If you eat a lot of meat and dairy and you take your probiotic, the food is going to outweigh.
The only time I feel that I think that probiotics are appropriate is when you're trying to re-inoculate a gut that is missing all these populations that are not just going to appear in your gut. So my suggestions, find a vegan girlfriend and kiss her.
There we go. That's right.
Well, we could talk about a fecal transplant for Michael.
Oh, goody.
Yeah.
I was hoping you two bring this up.
So
can I tell you my story about that though?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so
fecal. First, we should explain what a fecal transplant is.
Yes, fecal transplant is when you take feces, basically stool from a healthy donor, and you put it inside the colon or the GI tract of a person who has disease. So back about 10 years ago, this practice became very popular because we have this superbug called C. diff, and it's killing people. It's literally killing people and putting people in the ICU and making people very sick. At first, it was no problem. We just took out a little metronidazole, which is an antibiotic commonly against C. diff. We used to, first of all, we used to give people C. diff by using antibiotics, which eradicated
the good bacteria.
Right?
Oh my gosh.
And then we're like, oops, now you have C. diff. And so let's give you metronidazole, which was the drug of choice. And within like 7 days, these people would be good. Okay. C. diff would go away. They'd be fine. Then we found these superbug C. diff bacteria that would not respond to flagell. Then we would pull out the big guns like vancomycin. So we were doing great, killing off these C. diff bacteria with the vanco. And then we're like, well, one is not fully effective. Let's use both. So commonly in the ICU, what we're doing is we're doing IVs and POs of both. Okay. So then we're like, we had a few patients who wouldn't even respond to the both antibiotics. So then
is this antibiotic resistance that we're seeing?
They're superbugs. They're antibiotic resistance, and they were winning. They were winning the battle. So somewhere along the line, we're like, well, if the reason the C. diff is becoming strong because we don't have the good gut microbiome.
And C. diff just is a bacteria.
Right.
Okay. So it's a bad bacteria essentially in the gut.
When the good bacteria dies out, C. diff wins, and it starts becoming pathogenic, and it starts producing toxins that cause diarrhea, colitis, and blood in the stool, and sepsis and death. So what we decided, okay, well, we're killing off the good bacteria, and the C. diff is getting stronger, and our antibiotics are not working. How about if we took healthy donors, took their feces, and re-inoculated the sick patients with the feces? How would that work? And within these people would get miraculous results. They would get better within days, right? I personally had a patient I was working at Poplar Bluff Regional Medical Center, my first job out of fellowship, and I had a patient who was literally dying, septic shock, on 5 pressors to beat her heart and get her her cardiovascular system going. She was on a ventilator, breathing for her. She was literally about to die. I put her on a table, and I gave her a fecal transplant, and I'm not kidding. I didn't even think she's gonna make it. Within 2 hours, 1 pressor came off. She didn't need it. She was starting to improve, where she was hemodynamically more and more stable as time went on, where 5 pressors got turned off, and 2 days later she got extubated, and she came to my clinic and thanked me from the bottom of her heart. And Where do they
get these
so
fecal?
In the old days, we used to test family members. Like we'd take a family member, sister, brother, son, daughter, and check them for hepatitis C, HIV, and hepatitis B, and all the STDs. And if they didn't have any, we would use their stool. What happened now, though, the exciting news is, well, we figured out, vegan poop is the most valuable poop out there because there's more diversity. So there's a...
Conversation's a bit much for me.
There's a poop bank, okay.
And how much does someone need? Like, how many bowel movements are we talking? You're stuffing up the colon of somebody else.
It's just a little...
It's just a little bit of stool is enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the funny thing is,
but I heard selling Dottie bowel movement. Now you can become an Olympian. That's how you can sell.
I swear to God, you could make so much money if you went and sold your poop. It's actually very difficult to qualify. Like you have to be fit. You have to be young. You have to be thin. You can't be overweight. But if you're vegan, obviously you have all of that most of the time. So
right.
So these people are under a lot of scrutiny to make sure that they're eating a whole food plant-based diet, not just vegan, and their stool is healthy, and they don't use drugs. They're living a totally healthy lifestyle, working out, and all of that. And that's the type of stool they're using now around the hospitals.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to kiss a vegan. I'm gonna have to get my stool from vegans. What else am I gonna have to get from the vegans?
It'll all be good, though. It'll all be good, Michael. Right. I promise.
You'll get a really kind, empathetic, compassionate heart. You already have that.
Well, I'm into kissing the vegans. I'll take that on any day of the week.
Okay, Dottie and I will work on that.
No problem.
You know what? I have some good news for you, Michael. There are 10 vegan females to 1 male. Isn't that true? The ratio is
no doubt. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were a guy.
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
whether they want to kiss a non-vegan. Male.
But I mean, if she's hot enough, he may just go cold turkey, and he'll have some constipation, but he'll be okay.
It's okay.
Move through it. No pun intended.
And why is that better than colonic, the fecal transplants? I've had a colonic, and I had that once, and we'll never ever do that again.
Right, colonics
but I thought it was
dangerous.
the right thing.
Yeah,
they actually take the good bacteria. That's the old thing.
It's been around for years and years, for thousands of years. Colonics. It's kind of like douching. Do you guys remember douching, where we used to eradicate the vaginal gut microbiome? Vaginal microbiome. Yeah. Eradicate everything. Just wash it out. Same thing. Douching is the same thing as doing a colonic. What you're doing is you're washing out the gut microbiome, and it's really bad. So besides eradicating,
but what if you're a meat dairy eater and you want to flush out the nasty stuff?
Don't do it.
It doesn't work that way, because you can never. It's not like a. It's not
it has
like
to come from the food,
gun where you go shoot only the bad guys. It kills everything.
Yeah.
It just kind of takes out everything.
Kind of like chemo.
Exactly, like
Yeah,
chemo, it kills
okay.
your bad cells, like cancer cells and good cells. You
And
can't
good.
discriminate, right? So, number one, there's really nothing that I can think about that an enema or a colonic would do, except if you have like a lot of stool stuck in there and it's impacted. I sometimes use some enema techniques to take. These patients are in the hospital often, right? They're hospitalized. They have stool impaction, usually in the elderly in nursing homes where they're not walking around and having regular bowel movements.
Or a lot of the morphine drugs
And
also.
that's right. The narcotics are a
the
huge
narcotics.
cause, right? So what we do is we put our hands in there and actually pull out the stool. And by the way, this happens. One of my pediatric colleagues told me that they actually have to do this in kids. You have to put your hand in there and pull out the poop. Now, when you initially disimpact the bottom part, you still have a lot of colon to cover. So then an enema or a colonic would be beneficial to get all of that out. However, in a healthy individual, to do that kind of a practice routinely will definitely is a bad idea. I would discourage anyone from doing that.
Yeah, bacteria, we have to learn to love bacteria. And in our society, we're afraid of it. We have all these antibacterials, and we have to learn to love it. I'm so happy because I only wash my face once a day.
Okay.
And even with soap, I usually don't. Now I've heard even the bacteria on our skin is really important, and we tend to wash it away, and people, that's not good for your skin, and it can age it prematurely, et cetera. So you are really bringing such important information to people and to your patients and to everybody who comes in contact with you, because this information about bacteria is so new.
Yeah, it's brand spanking new. I mean, it's like, it's way over my head when I even first started talking about it. It was like just to even think that our gut is directing so much of our health and our disease and how we feel, from our mood to our emotions to even our physicality and our output. I mean, it's mind blowing, but it's, of course we're finding out, new things because, we're supposed to, hopefully we're moving along forward as a society.
Absolutely. Even in inflammatory gut diseases, I find that patients with inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, and ulcerative colitis, they've done testing where they would give these people cheese, for example, and they would get worse. But even to this day, if you go to a traditional gastroenterologist who's not, I'm younger, so I'm, have some newer knowledge, but if you go to an older gastroenterologist and ask, I have colitis, do you think diet has anything to do with it? Invariably, they usually say diet has nothing to do with it. In fact, one of my patients that I just recently scoped was telling me, he's on TNF alpha inhibitors, Remicade, and he said to me, I heard you're so into nutrition and things like that. I'm an athlete and I hate being on these drugs. What do you think? I was like, well, come see me. I was actually treating his wife. I was like, come see me. He said, well, my doctor said nutrition has nothing to do with it. I said, I can pull up 3 papers that will show you if you eat dairy that your colitis is going to get worse.
And loads of case
and yet
studies.
they do tell you not to eat vegetables and things like that. If you have
right.
a lot of these
Exactly.
problems, to eat protein and fat and not eat the fiber,
which
because
is the exact opposite.
We're learning.
Exactly.
Why do you think with Crohn's disease that doctors say that?
Well, initially, the thing is that Crohn's disease has so many different stages, and there's an acute inflammation. So when you have Crohn's disease, mouth to anus, you're basically sometimes carpeted with ulcerated lesions all from mouth to anus. Your gut microbiome is gone, destroyed. You have no way of digesting this fiber. So if you give these people fiber-rich foods, they can't handle. In fact, they can't handle any food. What you have to give them is and they lose a lot of weight because they can't absorb these calories. So you have to give them what's called the elemental diet, which is pretty mumuch pre-digested food. It's all in little amino acids, not protein. You give them amino acids, magnesium, calcium, potassium. It all has to be in subunits, so we call that an elemental diet. So you have to give them all of that. They can't go and eat fiber suddenly. They would not be able to handle, like you would have pieces of food come out exactly like they swallowed it. And so then you slowly increase the fiber, very, very, very slowly increase the fiber in their diet. However, to those people who are listening, don't listen to your doctors who would tell you, go from an elemental diet to eating meat and dairy. That would be horrible. But that's commonly the knowledge that's shared among these poor patients who don't know any better, and they're relying on their gastroenterologist to tell them, what they need to eat, and they get wrong information.
So someone with Crohn's disease, their gut microbiome can eventually be rebuilt.
Yes, there is no studies to say how long it takes or but we do have some limited studies that show that when you take probiotics and re-inoculate so there are some plant-based centers, what they do is we don't know how long it takes for it to rebuild, right? So what we do is we just re-inoculate with different billions and billions of different, one of my heroes, Dr. Pamela Pompey actually has a center. If you guys have Crohn's disease who are listening, you want to talk to her. She has a center where she re-inoculates the gut microbiome. She puts people on a plant-based diet and tries to give them as many calories as she can. She's a dietitian, registered dietitian, plant-based, all plant-based. And so what she does is she takes them and gives them mega doses of probiotics to re-inoculate the gut and slowly transitions them where they can finally digest the food as they're getting therapy. And by the way, I'm not saying that most people with such severe disease can just eat plants and be fine. That's sometimes the gut is too far gone where that's where Western medicine is helpful. You pull out the big guns, induce remission, and help them never get to that stage again.
Right.
You see?
Yeah.
So usually we always want to find out at the end, like our guests, just favorite vegan meal, favorite plant-based meal. But I want to keep helping people because you're doing such an incredible job at that. What would the plate look like for the listeners that are like Michael thinking about transition to help his gut microbiome, but not shock it to where he's going to have constipation, diarrhea, discomfort, right? Gas, bloating. What would that plate look like, that beautiful plant-based plate?
So to start with, I would suggest sweet potatoes and a lot of just regular potatoes and steamed vegetables rather than raw vegetables, rice, brown rice, and basically avocado, nuts and seeds if they can, they're okay with eating all of that. And then, fruits. Fruits are great. Easily digested most of the time, like berries. And then for a whole week, try to keep the fiber around 15 grams, kind of like what the standard American diet.
Per day or per week?
Per day.
Okay.
Per day, 15 grams per day. Now, let me tell you, that's what the recommendation is for in America, to keep it to at least the minimum 15. Most Americans don't even get that. They get like 5. But anyway.
But aren't our ancestors ate 80 grams?
Oh, yes.
100 grams.
I'm a little person and I get 100 grams.
Wow. Wow.
And of course, our ancestors didn't go to the gym and deadlift. So, I need to eat more calories, which translates to more fiber. But you can never get too much fiber, that's for sure. And so pretty much what I would suggest is slowly add colors, add more raw foods, add more legumes. It may take about 6 to 8 weeks to start eating legumes and high fiber rich foods. So if you look at the groups of foods with fiber, legumes have the highest. So that's why people who don't have healthy guts, they can look at beans. They look at beans and they get bloated. Yeah. They can't eat that stuff. Grains are high in fiber. So a lot of times they can't tolerate all of that. Sometimes raw vegetables, obviously. So what you can do, give them avocados, which have little fiber, and fruits and things like potatoes, right? Starchy vegetables, and then slowly bring in the grains and the legumes and the raw vegetables.
All potatoes?
Yep, any potato is good.
Okay.
Yams, sweet potatoes, white potatoes.
Love sweet potatoes.
Purple potatoes.
Yes.
Okay.
And the purple potatoes, so the deeper the color in a vegetable, the more antioxidants, obviously. So I usually gamify it for my patients. I'm like, count 8 colors on your plate, count 10 colors. And the more colors you have, the more a variety of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and the deeper the color, the more antioxidants. And that's what kills cancer cells, right? The antioxidants.
And gives you diversity in your gut because it forces you to eat a variety of foods.
Absolutely. Now you're speaking my language.
You taught it to me.
You're hired.
So thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Dr.
Pleasure.
Angie.
And thank you for increasing awareness in the world, because God knows that we all need this information, and people are suffering with disease and band-aiding their disease with medications.
Yeah. Tell us what your website is, where our viewers and listeners can
Sure,
reach you.
www.drangiehealth.com. And
You have an Instagram too.
I
don't you?
do. ANGIE.SADEGHI. And I try to be very active on Instagram and post, but it's hard being a mom and a doctor, but I try to be very active. And so there are a lot of good stories on my Instagram, and I think they're good stories and hopefully good posts that are educational.
Dotsie loves them. So,
Yeah, it's such a great feed. And one thing that you have on there, I found I loved, top 7 reasons to see a plant-based doctor.
Oh, yes.
That people can go and look at. Yeah, I liked that one a lot.
Thank
that
you.
post. It's
Thank
helpful.
you.
Thank you so
You're
much.
extraordinary. You'll come back for part 2, right?
Please, absolutely.
Okay.
Or you can count me in.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switch4good.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to Switch for Good. This is the future.